I want this to be like something that everyone learns about. That's the only reason. Let's see here. Adam, YouTube Live, we will let you kind of welcome everybody.
Okay, well, hey everyone, out in YouTube world or wherever you're coming in for, and yeah, Curling and I go way back. Adam Cole, a little bit of a jack of all trades, started a nonprofit, and now I am launching a venture out of that, the nonprofit side that takes everything forward, that does digital payments and micro lending. So just some history for everyone to kind of catch us up to the now. Met Curling and Fokcus 2019 for their accelerator. And that's obviously was still doing more predominantly the nonprofit then, and really helped us focus into, even as a nonprofit, what's our revenue model, what's our strategy. You can't be everything, and he helped me get focused. So as now launching the new venture and really trying to figure out how to get some of the different things that come in a for-profit model. How do you get capital? How do you show your revenue? Again, revenue model is always key. What's your total addressable market? We're actually trying to now find another accelerator. So I don't know, Curling, if you're offering, but we're definitely I think accelerators, though, just as a plug for anyone that's starting something, it's all about getting your tribe
Yeah.
and learning, growing together, having sort of access to advisors, just having a team that can kind of say, hey, maybe you should go this way or that. But thanks for having me, and always open to questions or comments. And obviously we got a great crew here assembled to see where this goes.
Yeah, I like it. I'll drive a little bit, but I do feel like like a good to great. Like we have great people on the bus, right? You've been through Focus Accelerator. You're creating your own seller. Tripty actually has all this knowledge on the accelerators. She was even counseling me, giving me mentorship behind the scenes on Goldman Sachs. So I'll look more on that. Sunny, you've been through Focus. So you can give a little operator feedback on accelerators and things of that nature. But just to give everyone kind of context, really, is that Focus is doing a research study, and Tripty's actually doing some research too, all on this sphere. But my focus was been on looking at really great or unique accelerators helping out veterans, women, BIPOC. And let me look at them, interview them, understand a little bit about them. I don't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel, but I do want to make sure the things that we do is authentic, right? And that's kind of like the theme of this. I feel like this would be like a 3-part series where we're looking at accelerators, looking at how to apply to it. That's kind of part 1, and that's what I'll kind of go through, how it applied to the Morgan Stanley, kind of this multicultural innovation lab. And then Trippy, I'll bounce some things off you too about pitch perfect, how to make sellers better, right? Could be some things of that part. But thank you guys for all coming on. Subscribe, and I'm gonna share my screen offhand. But while I'm doing that, Trippy, can I ask you one question? You're in San Francisco area, things of that nature. A lot of times groups talk about YC and acceleration and what that is. Like from your perspective, what's your thought on initial accelerators in general? Like my point of view is actually a lot of times when I was younger, I was like, I can only be successful with accelerator, or I can only be successful if I did seed. It's like 2 paths, right? What's your point of view? And I can start, but I was just curious on that.
I happen to sort of accidentally fall into the accelerator route. So I was a member of On Deck through their before they became ODX. They had a program called ODF for On Deck founders, and I was working on the Stylish Closet at the time, and I didn't really know what to expect, but I was like, okay, let me try it out. Let me see what this is. I've heard great things. And I would say that the biggest thing is something Adam hit on in terms of tribe. never, ever, ever met a better community. It's
I like
wonderful,
that.
and it's structured so well. There were mastermind groups for if you're having a problem with you're having a problem, right? Like Adam and I have discussed it. We've all discussed it. Like there's nothing more lonely than being a founder. Nothing.
Yeah.
It's you're on your own. And sometimes you're just looking for that spark from someone, like someone to give you that motivation, someone to give you that comfort of don't worry, I've done that. Someone to give you the light of I'm going to introduce you to XYZ person. So through On Deck, they have a co-founder matching program, which is wonderful. They had again the mastermind program of going through a large problem, but then they also had accountability groups. So
Yeah.
depending where you are in your cycle of, again, Tripti, you said you were going to get this pitch deck done by this time.
Right. Right.
Tripti, did you have those 5 meetings? Did you sign up your first 10 customers? So sort of like startup school, but on steroids of making sure that the accountability is there, the mastermind, the co-founder. But the community, there is nothing like finding the right community and making sure that that entrepreneurial ecosystem holds for founders to make sure they keep their motivation. I think that's the number one thing that is sad when founders lose motivation. And I think that community is great. So I had a really good experience.
That's great, and I'll touch on some of those things too. But I just want to get your kind of feedback and kind of think about that. Like I said, Fokcus is actually going through a transition. We are looking at ways we can be better at helping in the community. We also looking at being fun, like the side by side. But I like to do things in kind of phases, and the phases we are right now are learning. Right, we are learning from all these great people. We're learning from helping with Connect All. We're learning people like Tripti and Adam. Ali's doing things in Africa. We're actually learning from this group. We've been studying it. Morgan Stanley, most people know, is on Wall Street and they're really good at M&As. I think they're kind of number one M&As, capital market. But when I actually seen that they had a total lab, and this is only about 2 weeks ago, USC introduced me to the group, at least to the program. And I said, no, let me just apply, or at least look at what the application process is, and then also let me learn more about it. So this is kind of like my behind the scenes of what happened the last week or so, and also it was some information I got from some other accelerators too. I kind of mixed in there. Most people know me, CEO, serial entrepreneur. I've been working on Fokcus for about 6 years, and I actually feel like I still am learning. It's kind of interesting. I want to talk a little bit on this roadmap about. And this is just so everyone knows my learning process. When any program I'm going to be part of or any partnership or problem, I usually try to do as much learning on the leaders, on the people that actually founded it. I want to know why they found it. I want to understand how they think. I've been reading books of founders, of people who've done things. So this book intro, step one, is a little bit about Carla Harris. She's an amazing woman. I'll put that out there. I even found out she has a musical background. She's a singer and things of that nature. But Harvard grad, went to Wall Street. In fact, she said she was like negative motivated. People were like, I don't think you should go into Wall Street, and I don't think you should go at M&A because you're not gonna have a life, right? So it was very interesting hearing her on her podcast, and we'll pub her podcast a little bit later on. But she has 2 books. I'm reading the Strategize to Win one because I want to learn a little bit more about her thought process on things. She Expect to Win, I'll probably read afterwards, but this is some book recommendations about Carla and how her thought process is. But if anyone wants to actually be part of an accelerator or understand certain things, I think it's actually really good. If a person who's created something that you like, I think reading a book about what their thought process is really good. At least you can be synced up and see if that's going to be an authentic relationship that you'll like. And me reading it, it's like one of the thought processes that she has a lot is that you should expect things. You should not only expect them, but prepare. And that focus, we're always helping with that. One focus tip is go to the Multicultural Innovation Lab website. There's a great number of podcast episodes, but the one I really like was this Articulating RY. And it's her, kind of like the co-founder, Alice Vilma, is on it. It's great. Second one, we're just going to go over accelerators in general, but I'm going to put the more lens on Morgan Stanley's Multicultural Innovation Lab. The one thing I liked about them is that they had the same lane that we were going on, right? One, one of their criterias, right? Because accelerators always have criterias to participate. And this picture is interesting. We helped with Bunker Lab for a lot of years. I told Adam that one of the things of criteria for Bunker Labs is that you had to be a veteran or you had to be a military spouse, right? So it is good when you're looking in general for accelerators, see what the criteria is, because actually, if it is your people, if it is your kind of community, it would be good just to be part of it. Earlier, Trippy was saying being part of this tribe, being part of this family. So I think that's important. When we were looking at this lab, we said, know what? Their criteria is that they have to, the founder has to be either a woman or multicultural. They actually have to have be tech enabled. So that was important for them, meaning being a technology startup or tech enabled. And that's interesting because, at Fokcus, we are always kind of promoting being tech enabled, but they really emphasize it. And also be seed to Series B. So what people should understand is that a lot of groups are like early, like pre-seed, right? And that's meaning maybe pre-revenue, maybe not necessarily have launched yet, right? But maybe launch, but maybe no revenue. They actually, in a lot of ways, want you to be able to launch and have some revenue to show it before you apply, right? So it was really unique on this, meaning that maybe some of the groups that we'll be helping is like getting them to that level to be in the Morgan Stanley program. But it was very unique to have that type of, I guess, criteria for anything. And Tripty, I'll ask you this part too. With other groups too, I think even with Y Chimera, maybe correct me wrong. Do you need to actually have revenue for a lot of accelerators to be able to be accepted?
You don't have to. They take things at idea stage, but it's got to be ironclad. It's got to be sort of an ironclad idea. Otherwise, they're very specific about the metrics that they look at, actually. And if it's direct to consumer, very specific about week over week, month over month growth metrics. They really put that out there. So it's harder, and especially when there's so many people applying, it's harder when other people have shown so much traction if you're pre-product to get in. But they say you can get in pre-product or even pre having a co-founder. It's just, I think it makes it more difficult.
Got it. Adam, any feedback on that? Do you like that criteria that they have to already be launched and then having some revenue to be part of your program or the programs you had before?
Yeah, I think, every accelerator is different in that regard. Depends on where you feel like you're coming into the pipeline, as we say. In a lot of the work I do in Africa, we recognize that the accelerator itself is a pipeline to capital. And so, it's obviously a different model there where they don't have like the investment side and it's just capital is capital. But I think there's a lot to be said with, as you look at the different accelerators and the point you're coming in, you also have to do some self-reflection on your own, and just be honest with yourself. Okay, as Tripp even said, like part of their thing is a co-founder matching, or, I think, and don't mean to drag on here, but the other piece of it is then also, whether you're launched or not, how are you showing, sustained growth, even if it's just like, hey, we're halfway, 75% through an MVP, or we've got mock-ups. We already got these 3 advisors. We've already been reaching out and doing this many pitches, or we have this many customer surveys. So there's a lot you can do. Just keep, I think the bottom line for every entrepreneur is just keep trucking, keep going, and then find the kind of product market fit in terms of accelerators for where you're at.
I like that. And they did mention product market fit. It's kind of crucial too when they do some of their due diligence. The second thing we found out with in general accelerators is it going to be how structured the program is going to be, right? This is actually a pitch here with 1 Million Cups. 1 Million Cups is not an accelerator. It's pretty much like a pitch competition, but it's really unstructured. You can go there, pitch, get feedback. you never can go there again. No accountability, but it's really good. It's actually it's kind of like initial stepping stone for you to get to Accelerator. So that's why I kind of highlighted them. For Morgan Stanley's Multicultural Innovation Lab, it's very structured. It's a 5-month program. It's actually a hybrid. I think the one thing I was kind of thinking about too is that with COVID, I was wondering how this was going to be, because the next cohort for the lab is going to be in the summer. They said they're still going to make it hybrid. They're going to have a person and Zoom, but I think the one thing they said is that they really value this really important thing is relationships. And there's this really great story. I was listening to one of the founders from the previous cohort. I think they're on cohort 7 to 8 right now. But the previous cohort, or inaugural cohort, one of the founders came back in. He got acquired by a huge corporate company. And he said, you know what? The whole time I was there, we were doing goal setting weekly with different mentors. And we wind up being acquired a couple years later after we had graduated. But the group that acquired us was our mentors in the program. It actually showed how important it was for the relationship. And now he's a VC now, but the way he conducts things and the way that he actually has, benefits his founders is making sure they have this really deep relationship with the mentors, a really deep relationship with groups that they probably wouldn't have access or opportunity to talk with. And the plug for Morgan Stanley is that their podcast is called Access and Opportunity. That's what they are in some ways using or prioritizing for BIPOP and women founders. So very structured, 5-month hybrid remote, weekly goal setting. That's really intensive, but this relationship focus. I feel like that is part of this formula that we've been seeing with some of these really great groups like Morgan Stanley or Connect All and other groups. Third, accelerators, and people always talk about it, like the money into startups. Like, what does that look like? I know Y Combinator is maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's like 150. I think it's 8% equity, things of that nature. For Morgan Stanley, what they actually said, I actually kind of did a screenshot so it would make sure I had that correctly. But they contribute $250K to each startup participating in the New York-based program. That's kind of hybrid too. 200 in euros for their London-based program. So some of our groups, and we have some groups that we've been helping in England and London. So it's like I thought that it was great that they can cover both. And there's an equity stake. Now, I need to go deeper into what the equity stake is going to be. We even went on to part 2 or part 3 of this kind of application workshop, or this accelerator application workshop. We can look at that. But Tripti, like with equity stake, this is kind of a key part. In fact, some of my startups didn't even want to go to accelerators because they would have to give up this early equity. What do you think about that?
I think there's more than equity. So the first is when it was ODF and not ODX.
Yeah.
You paid for it. And so therefore there was no equity. And now there is the standard sort of, I think it's like 125 and 7. But
Right.
I think, and so I know that this is a little bit different, but I think that there are other factors. So there's one that's just for women. I'm forgetting. And when I remember it, I'll put it in the chat. It's 400,000 for 10%, so it's not, in my head, it's not just the number though. It's Morgan Stanley is going to introduce you to follow-on capital at a much faster rate than an accelerator that doesn't have an established reputation. So for me, it's not just the 7% or the 10% or, the amount.
Sure.
It's also, do you have enough capital to survive for the year? Right? Like the way it is now, I don't think most investors want to invest unless you have enough to last a year, right? But like, do you have enough to last a year? What is the cost of that capital beyond just the 7 to 10%? And the cost of that capital is the benefit that you are going to receive from someone like Morgan Stanley, from someone like Launch with GS, from someone like YC, from someone like Techstars. That's very different, because at the end of these, you usually do a demo day.
Sure.
And they'll introduce you to lots of investors. The quality of those investors at the end are very different than if you just did it off of AngelList, right? So I think it's just something that founders should keep in mind.
I love that. One of the founders actually said too, who was on the podcast, said when he actually talked to other during his kind of fundraising round, when he talked to others about his company, the investors always asked him, "Okay, who else is in this round?" Right? He said that was like the first question all the time. And when he actually said Morgan Stanley, when he actually said that, they said, "Okay, well, if Morgan Stanley has listened to you and believes in you, I should listen." So he said he had way more attention, or his company, in some ways, got more attention just because Morgan Stanley gave him a thumbs up early. And I thought that was important. He's from a small island. I forgot what the island was. He said, I had access to anyone, right? And at least at this point now I have access. So I thought that was great. I know, Adam. I was gonna ask Adam a question on equity, but I'll ask him in a minute. One focus tip is hey Adam. Adam, one question for you. Is there any equity stake with groups that you work with, or is it just more this kind of rev share aspect?
Yeah, I think equity is Tripty, you kind of put it, is spot on. I think the biggest thing for any founder is to just, at the very beginning of the journey, really just sort of in their own mind do some self-reflection of like, be willing to give up the company.
Yeah.
And like every
that's a tough one, Adam, when you say it that way.
Yeah, but as long early on now you have to be careful, in transparency. I've been launching this venture, even I was looking at and giving 5% for maybe some early work on an MVP.
Sure.
But then you're like, well, that 5% sustainable in that? Okay, now it's all of a sudden the work's done and the equity is still owned by someone in it, and you're not getting any more work.
Yeah.
But on a accelerator, you're giving that equity, but then you're getting a long-term relationship with an institutional partner. So in that way, it's really valuable. One accelerator that I'm going to be a part of is about 2.5%, and they don't give capital.
Okay, got it.
But at the same time, you're like, okay, it's worth it for the relationships. So all that has to be looked at from a founder standpoint of capital, relationships, and what's the end where we're going on this journey together.
Sure.
So all that plays into it, and certainly. So just what was the one that Morgan Stanley said they were getting for you or doing?
Yeah, they're doing
$250,000.
Yes, $250K.
Amount of capital.
It is. I think, and for the space that they're in, and that's what we're in the same space, the same groups they're in. I think that was one of the ones that was more the larger type of fund. So that's what we're looking at. That what does that look like for some of our groups, and how do we actually, in some ways, prepare our groups to look at like a Morgan Stanley or like Tripty said, a Goldman Sachs, things of that nature.
Yeah, and obviously, I think the other thing though for everyone though that's going through this process, because I think this was brought up in the thing that you mentioned right at the beginning of like, do you have to be Series A, B? I'm not sure what Morgan Stanley's criteria, but I would think the reality is the more capital that's on the table, the more advanced you have to be. So if you're just like, that's the one thing, and to give like Founders Institute a plug, they take you from literally idea.
Yeah.
Like literally just like, even if you have a paper napkin, join this accelerator and we'll get you going. And we can't give you any capital, but we'll maybe give you like leadership, mentorship. Now they have different accelerators. Like they also, I think, have a growth accelerator or something like that. But something to look into that obviously a Morgan Stanley it's gonna be highly competitive for that type of capital and that type of name brand. So something to think about for founders is they're like, if you want to just get like your foot in the door somewhere, maybe pay a little bit up front, give a little equity, get yourself going. And, especially if this is your first rodeo, right? Now, if you're curling, already sold IPO, like right?
Yeah.
Then you can choose whatever one you want. But those are some things to think about too.
Yeah, but you know what? Even for like serial entrepreneurs like me, right? Adam, it's still that relationship. Like you still want
Yeah.
to make sure you have that good connection
Yeah,
with
of
someone,
course.
right? You
Of
know,
course, of
even
course.
for me. But that no, that's great. That's great. That's great feedback. I had a little focus tip yesterday. I've been part of all these kind of VC groups and things like nature's group, but I went. USC has this Viterbi startup garage. I go every Wednesday. I'll do a little plug for USC where I went to school at. And Ken Hayes spoke. He's one of the founders of the largest kind of clean tech accelerator. But he spoke so authentically to the cohort and to the startups. But one thing he actually said, he said, I want everyone who applies to my accelerator to be authentic on your application and in your life, because he said it's the only way I can help you, right? If you're saying you're perfect in every area of your company, then I probably can't help you. But if you at least are vulnerable that you need help with sales, you need some, then that's going to allow me and other mentors to help. So I really loved how he said that. Like a lot of times when you're filling out applications, you feel like you have to be perfect. He said, no, be vulnerable. And I love that. So I gave him a little focus tip too. Also, we talked yesterday at USC about Founder's Dilemma, the book. I always, Adam probably heard that a million times, but I think that's really great to actually get your mindset on what you need to do as a founder. Now, this is the part that actually I'm going to be really authentic on. We just talked about authentic, but you know what? We were trying to actually look ways to actually help people, or in fact help others, right? And I said, you know what? I talked to Joanne. I said, no, I think I'm gonna apply, not just kind of look in or talk with the group at Morgan Stanley. I think I'm gonna apply and see what I can learn from that, and then tell the whole group what happened. And so I'm gonna be real authentic. The first slide is make time to do it. So I say to do Morgan Stanley and actually to apply in a way that's going to put your best foot forward. It's going to take about 2 weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks to actually get through the whole process. Part of it was the fact that, doing kind of supporting documents. We had to we'll get more into that. But I think the key thing is that I didn't have enough time. I found out about the application maybe about a week ago. But I wanted to show people in ways that, even if you're doing grants, I have Paola. Can you hear me? Is she on?
Yes, I'm here.
Even with grants, right, Paola? Like you need to take time to even apply for grants, right? Like how long that takes, right? It's not going to take a week, unless you have a lot of things that you've already prepared for. But I was thinking about that.
I think even when you have already prepared for other grants, you need to normally customize for specific ones.
That's true.
So if you have the whole week free, that's probably okay. But I would say yes. Like it takes a long time. Yeah.
And have a partner. I know you and Carly, when you guys do grants and when you guys are applying for certain things, applying for things, at least you have a team, right?
Yes.
In some ways working.
Yes.
You're good at one thing, Paula. Carly's really good at that. Research, you guys bringing it together.
And it also helps because then you feel less nervous because if you miss something, you have someone else to take a look and say, oh, you forgot to write that, or this doesn't make sense. And you have someone to ask about so should I frame this as this or that? And I don't know for the Morgan Stanley application, if that matters, but I think a lot of times it's good to have someone to help you to at least you have a second opinion on how you're writing something.
I like that. Paula, have you ever had it where you're writing maybe a grant? Because I feel like grants, it's an application, very similar process, but that there's some sort of third party you give to someone to look over it in general, and then you get it back. I was thinking about that when I was doing this process. I wish I had someone who could actually go through some of the things that I put down.
So far, most of the grants were so last minute, kind of your case, that you never I think that's a great idea, but then you really need to be really organized to have the time to ask someone to take a look and not say, okay, here it is. Can you take a look now? So I think that I think ideally, yes. I think the problem, for me at least so far, all the grants that I applied, or it ends up being kind of almost last minute, and then you don't want in the last week to ask someone, but I think that would be great if you have a third person to take a look.
To take a look. When we did the SBIR grant application, we had someone look over it in general what Joanna did, because it took us about like 3 to 6 months I did to do that. And we had someone look over it, but I actually feel like, oh man, I think if we had someone who actually won an SBIR grant look over it, we would have been good. Right?
We did ask, and I don't know, like if we did ask other people who got the grants and were successful to send us their narrative, like their written stuff, so we could see like how they wrote it. If they wrote it and they were successful, that was a chance like we could learn from that. So we did that. We didn't ask anyone to read later, but that is also a way that you can do it. It's like asking other people, like, can you send me the grant that you applied, or the application that you did that you got it, because then you try to use the language that is probably what that organization wants, right?
Exactly. So one of my next steps when we're doing this kind of workshop, and we're doing part 2, I was going to try to interview someone who already got into the Morgan Stanley Multicultural Innovation Lab. I want to interview them, see what they did, how long they took, with that process, because we learned about this, Paula, maybe a week before it was due at USC, and I said, oh wow, I would have loved to interview and kind of talk with that process. But the key thing, all that takes time. So whatever application, if you're doing YC, you're doing Morgan Stanley, you're doing 500 startups, all these groups, Techstars, Ryan Kuder, their group, make some time for it and dedicate a block of time that maybe in some ways that you can maybe get a third party, you can get other people to kind of help. So that was my first kind of lesson learned, and this is real, that I thought the workshop was like showing you guys I was 91% complete, but not 100%. Second part of the thing, if you guys kind of look back at this, there's on the left side it says basic information. That actually was fairly simple, but you know what? Some of the basic information is that having a website. So I want to tell people, like, you know what? And that might be basic for some people. They might not have a website, but they expect you to at least have a website. So that was an interesting piece on the basic information. The second part was this founder's information. What I learned from Ken Hayes from Clean Tech Open, he actually said is that when someone sends in their founders for their Accelerator application, they look at what they written, and then they scour the internet. They look at your LinkedIn. They look at your social media. They look at everything to make sure it's authentic, that it is lined up. So I put these kind of screenshots on there that I made sure everything that we put in the application was lined up with myself, Joanna, we had Ganesh too, with their LinkedIn, so that it looked very, very comprehensive in a sense. And it was really interesting hearing Ken say that. And I heard there was another VC too, is that when we do our due diligence, we're looking beyond. In fact, we're looking to see that you're just honest, right? You might not have to. You don't have to say all these other great, or like you went to Stanford or went to Ivy League. You know what? We just want to know, did you go to school or not, right? Facebook founder did not. They dropped out. Mark did. Bill Gates dropped out. That's not the key thing. But the main thing is actually making sure you're authentic with them so they can help. So I actually put this on here because Ken Hayes said, yes, I will look at your application, but I'm going to look at your LinkedIn. I'm going to look at everything else. And it's really good for you as a founder to actually understand that and making sure you make time to update your LinkedIn. And I actually have to update my LinkedIn. As being what I've seen is very bare bones. So I was like, oh, okay, that's real right there. And then I think the one piece was the application questions, right? I put a few on here, but as everyone knows on with Fokcus and alumni, we really focus on the pitch deck. And if you've updated your pitch deck and you really have worked on your pitch deck, doing the application for Morgan Stanley will be actually fairly easy to do, right? Because it has a lot of the pitch deck questions. I'll give you an example. One of the first questions was, tell about your business in one sentence. We always talk about that. Like, what's that billboard slide look like? What's that one? Another one was very interesting too, is on the fact that, what's your revenue model? We have several videos on that with Professor Clark talking about revenue model, right? that was one of the key pieces that they actually look like. They want to know how you make money. The industry question was interesting for us because we've always been kind of more ed tech, but now we're looking at being more enterprise and actually a fund. So I had a little issue with this one, to be honest. I had initially education, and then I switched it to enterprise services. So make sure you get other people's feedback on who you are too, because yes, that's a fairly easy question industry, but I actually had to switch back. And I switched back to enterprise services. We've sold our software, our platform to enterprises, to other institutions. So I switched that. But this problem you are solving, it was like 3 parts. The question said, problem you are solving, the customer you are solving for, and what alternatives do customers have, right? I think this is something that, yes, we do have it in our pitch deck, but it was really important for me to understand what's the alternative to you, right? What if you weren't around, what would people do, right? And for me, I put SCORE offhand. I don't know if anyone knows about SCORE, but I was a mentor for SCORE for about 10 years after my third exit. And SCORE was great, and SBTC was great. It was actually they're free, right? And so I put on there SCORE and SBC would be an alternative to Fokcus, right? We do mentoring. But I did say the fact that why we would be better offhand when helping founders is that one, BIPOP and women we're focused on, but also that the domain knowledge on startups. So make sure you understand why you're better than that alternative. That was a really crucial one. And then this was when I had a little issue on, I had to go talk to some friends on understanding this process, but how do you acquire customers? Since we work with universities, nonprofits, and that, like, what's the one way we acquire, or at least get your brand out? One way is we do the podcast, of course. That was not too obvious to me. We were doing this to help, but a lot of groups like some of the universities know about us because they use our podcast for some of their curriculum. So that was one way. The other way we actually put was the fact that we actually help a lot in the community. So I'm part of a startup San Diego and workforce partnership. We just help, right? So I think that's one. Tripty, you got your screen on. Any feedback on any of these questions? Maybe that whole problem you're solving, alternative ways that you would actually probably put that. I know I'm thinking about Pitch Perfect in my head, but. Any feedback on answering questions of this nature?
I think I'm a little bit more pithy, Curling, to be honest. I think that I just like hit bullets fast of like getting them from here. Here's why it's innovative,
I love that.
But okay. I think it's really helpful to have all of this.
But I like how you said bullet points.
I do. I like to, because I think about it. These people are reading thousands of applications, right? They're reading so many. Like the ability to just know that you have what I'm looking for fast helps you and helps them. And I agree with you that once you have your pitch deck, you already have the information, but yeah, for me, maybe a little bit more.
I want to kind of second Tripit here because I think like the way that you write, like the format helps a lot. Like I don't read these applications, but I do read a lot of papers and reports, and we know that managers don't have time to read in detail all of that. So like I think bullet points really help, like quickly read it and get the information. And maybe like if you have a full like paragraph, it might be harder to kind of grasp or try to read it, or you just jump and don't read it.
I love it. You guys sound like one of my friends. My friends only likes me to email them with like yes or no questions. Like I have to email, has a question, yes or no. That's the time he has, like yes or no. That's it. So I totally agree with people of this nature. In fact, I did hear, I don't want to scare too many people, but on the podcast for Morgan Stanley for the Multicultural Innovation Lab, it was something of a nature that was harder to get in than Harvard, the actual lab, which was very unique. I'll double check that on a part 2 on that. But I remember Y Combinator said the same thing. Like it's harder to get in Y Combinator than like Harvard or MIT. And I know that's correct. I've heard that.
Well, that is correct because like Harvard has a 4% or like it's like a 3.8 or something percent acceptance rate. This goes back to like the fact that most, again, like obviously it's my problem with practice, but that women only get funded at 2%. It's significantly harder. And also think about it. You have self-selected down when you're applying to Harvard. So you already know that like the parameters are very clear. You know that you're in the test score range. You know that you're in the grade range. You know that you're in the extracurricular range. You know, like you've done that. For these, think about how many industries, how many companies, how many stages, how many different funding paths, how many different end customers. I mean, it would make sense that it would be significantly harder because it's much more widened aperture.
I that is like really true on that part. I have a question. I have a raised hand. I think it's Burb, right? Okay, face pop. Okay, how you doing, Burb?
Can you hear me okay, Curly?
I can hear you, Burb. Good to hear you.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. I was really concerned about my audio. So my quick question, and sorry for kind of being off topic.
No, it's good.
I did dive in a little bit late, but my quick question is, does Morgan Stanley have a specific genre of startups they are accepting, or is it open door?
That's a great question, Burb. All the information I got, because I looked at all the different cohorts, Burb, they were agnostic, meaning they weren't really specific on different industries, but they did want it to be, and you're in that realm, a technology startup or tech enabled. That is one of the criterias that they put like number one. I think it was number two. Women, multicultural, 1. 2, tech enabled or like a technology startup. You're in that realm. But they had some very interesting ones that they have, either being the one that I learned about was this open source kind of dashboard that someone did. Other ones doing with beauty. They had some other groups doing a vast, like a diverse industries. So that was actually really good for us because we're kind of agnostic at Fokcus too. But I think the main thing is I found out, Burb, that you know what, as long as you have this kind of tech enabled aspect of your business, then they want you to apply. Does that make sense, Burb?
Cool. Thank you. Nice.
Now the third part that was the most difficult part for me as a founder, and since I was kind of doing it kind of solo initially, was actually getting supporting documents. Now, one of the supporting documents was a pitch deck that I have kind of updated, which was great, but it didn't have all the new aspects of the side-by-side fund and things of that nature. The second supporting document that they actually needed was having your 2-year financial, so the forecasting and things of that nature. Now, I've been working with a couple groups at Connect All. I'll give a pitch to Mission Driven Financial. They do really great at forecasting some of our cohorts at Connect All. So Louis and all that group is going to be helping Aurelia. All those groups are going to be helping me with some of those things moving forward. But the third thing was really interesting. I don't know if anyone kind of always thinks about this, but was the cap table. Our cap table is very clean. It's very simple. But I've been talking to a lot more and more founders about how their cap table is not clean and not simple. And as I was listening to some of the podcast part, talking about how important it is moving forward, that some of the things that you do early on does affect you later on, right? And the cap table is usually, some of my VC friends say, is what they usually have an issue with. Tripti, anything on that?
Excuse me. Sure. So I think whoever has a direct entry onto your cap table has to be adding material value. If they have an individual name, they have to be adding value. And I think that is really important. I think that a lot of that's governed by the very specific milestones that are for each part of your plan. So people who are on your 2022 plan when you're just starting, as advisors are going to get a certain percentage, but they have to prove it over time. Cleaning off, like making sure that you have a cleansed cap table where if people, everyone's really excited in the beginning, everyone wants to be an advisor, everybody's jumping in. And then in 2 years, they've actually never done anything, never made one introduction, milestones weren't clear. Now
Right.
You have to clean them off.
Exactly.
That is something that gets neglected frequently. So I think if someone has a direct entry, they have to be defensible. And what I mean by that is you want to be able to go to your VCs and say, here's why I have Sunny on my cap table. Here's why I have Carly on my cap table, right? Like it's because one is offering me this advisement and education and paper, and one's offering me the hustle and the advice of like feet on the street, right? Like whatever that is. I think it's really important that people have that people see that. I also think that the other thing with cap tables are the percentages. If I gave you 5% for building a sales team, and I gave you 2% for building my actual product, that misalignment and incongruity starts coming into question. So I think it's the percentage that you put on, the names that you put on. And if a lot of people just want to give a small amount, 2,000, yes, whatever, put it in an SPV, have one SPV on your cap table. And the very last thing is that also is going to help you protect the rights of people for voting, the rights of people that are, involved in your company. How much information rights do they get? All of that stuff is a function of who's on your cap table. So it's really important.
I love it. Why I showed this image, just so everyone knows, is that the group, like Joanna and Andrew earlier on, like they were very diligent on making sure all of our supporting documents and documents in general were in one place. So the CEO curling can go anywhere, anytime. I was in Boston. I was looking for like supporting documents. Like, oh, you need that? Like we use this thing called Basecamp, right? Like, but it's actually really simple for CEOs. I would say starting off, these type of things, we're not just beyond the application. These type of things is what you actually kind of need to be organized to actually handle applications and doing things. But it's one reason why I actually put it up here. It's just like more of just lessons learned. Now, I think I'm just going to questions. We've been having questions offhand. The one thing I've been thinking about why I focus on applications and why I've been focusing on like pitch deck is that, you know what, when you're building a company, and I remember this a mentor saying that when you write things down, it solidifies things. Even me, who's been a serial entrepreneur, me actually writing down some of these things just to apply for the Morgan Stanley, it actually solidified some of the new ideas I had, solidified some of the new kind of like direction that we were kind of looking at Fokcus. And it actually helped me out. It's actually kind of liberating, the fact that I was working on an application. I hadn't been working on an application in a while. And then I think thirdly, it really allowed me to see that there are really great programs out there that are doing things similar to Fokcus, but they're doing things in like really unique ways. And it made me kind of hopeful. I know, Tripty, I was a little hopeful. Like when I see Perfect Pitch, I'm hopeful. Paola and Carly working on the research day, I'm hopeful. It's actually really great to kind of see these things, because as founders, Trippy, you were saying earlier, we do feel lonely, and we feel it's kind of like this. I was looking at this book. It's a unique book. I'll pull up later, but there's this famous graph that goes like this curve that startups go in, and there's this kind of valley of depression, or right? Like sometimes curling's in that, right? And so it's really interesting when you're going through this process. I would tell anyone, even if they're maybe at this like 60%, if they're gonna apply to Morgan or why, like just go through that process maybe once or twice. There's a lot of things that comes about it, and two, as a team, right? It also bonds a team because you're working on like one goal, right? And so that was the reason why I kind of did this kind of part one, more to kind of see, one, just peel a little bit behind the startup type of aspect, but also two, to show that we're all trying to help, we're all trying to actually learn, and I actually feel like this is going to be really great. The other parts of this is more going to go detailed into some of the other groups that have been part of the lab. And hopefully we can actually kind of talk with the founders and things of that nature later on. But I just want to be authentic how I was. And thank you guys for telling me I need bullet points, because, you know, I like bullet points, but I'd never add them in the application. But it actually was great. But let me open up to any other questions. Oh, Burb, you unmute yourself.
Yes, my question goes to the cap table as far as sitting with VCs, deal structuring with VCs. Is it and this is, this is completely novice because obviously I have not sat with a VC, but
Sure.
is it forgiving, quote unquote,
That's a great one.
when your cap table is inconsistent, when your cap table isn't congruent as you went from the micro investor to the angel investor, when you have experience with different fund amounts, but your disbursement of your equity doesn't line up and it's not aligned, is that like a true deal breaker, or will the VCs help you work through it? Or, is it forgiving, or is it just a complete turnoff?
That's a great question. Trippy, I have some feedback on both. Trippy, you want?
Yeah, I can start. Hi, Burv. I think that it's 100% forgivable as long as you have the answer. So the answer is, sure, in the beginning, I gave out more equity because I didn't have anything, and so I needed to build it. Like, as long as you have the answer, here's what I think your cap table shows. Just like, here's why I'm pushing curling on the bullets. Yeah. I think that everything that you have shows how you think. How you think. Can you be succinct? Can you be resourceful? Can you be scrappy? How do you think, right? And if every single founder, especially in their first company or whatever, every single person is going to make mistakes that we're going to learn more from than we're going to learn from our successes, right? So I would just use that as, this is why I did it. I did it because I really needed a product. I didn't have money, so I gave out more equity. And then the more capital I got, or the more that the product was able to fund itself, I was able to put things, back on track. Great. Like, that's just have an answer is what I'm saying.
Oh, I love that, Trippy. And I do agree with the...
Thank you. Got it.
I definitely agree with the bullet points. Maybe I missed that wrong. The only thing I said, Burb, I'll just from personal experience, my second company was an energy company. Did really well. We got acquired, largest utility. But you know what? They got us on the cap table. Okay, they in a lot of ways made it a little bit hard. So we did just like what Trippy said. We explained everyone. I'll give you a really quick example. We had someone on the cap table who wasn't there anymore, but he passed away. And they were saying, well, why don't you sell it? I said, well, you know what? We made a deal with someone that we would give some of that equity to his widow, and we had to explain that. Now, that's very unusual for startups to do that they usually buy back or doing like that. But we wanted to honor his memory in that one, and they said, you know what? I understand that. I understand why you have that person on there, right? But we had to explain that.
And further, it shows how you think. It shows that you're a compassionate person, that you care about the family, like all that. That's what I'm saying is, like, just bring it back to how you think in a favorable way, and you're fine. And also, everybody looks for reasons to ding people on valuation, right? If you have an extra liability, if you have to, like, they're going to look for it. So that your way out is just to have an answer.
No, that's so good, Trippy. That's so good. So, Burb, just get some of your storytelling, right? Just make sure you just have some of those things. I've been learning a lot more from some of these books, but one book was talking about anticipate. Founders really need to understand they need to anticipate, right? That would be one offhand knowing from Morgan Stanley's move that was the three things they wanted. They wanted pitch deck. Yeah, most people got pitch deck. 2-year kind of understand what the financials are. Got it. But the last one was that kind of cap table, right? That's the third thing. They could ask for other things, but that was important for them as a kind of like as a group that's going to be investing their time, their capital, their talent, right? So thank you guys for just listening to me as my journey goes and understanding all these type of labs and innovations that are going on in our community. And Paola, thanks for coming on too. I in the application I did put your research study in there, so I think that was I was part of it. Like, all right. Later on, I want to do a nod to Tripty's research study, just knowing that we're all in it together, right? Not only you, Morgan Stanley, but we're in it. There's other groups that are in it that are trying to help this kind of community. So I want to thank both of you, and Carly's on there too. I want to thank you guys for allowing me to actually add that in, that I can help you and that we're all working together. But Thank you, everyone. The next couple weeks are going to be very interesting. We have a city highlight coming up with Jasmine LaFleur and Greater Than Tech. We also have Rolanda Finley. She's going to be speaking coming up too. So we have a lot of great groups. But thanks for allowing me to, also Tripty and Paula giving me feedback. In fact, I feel like the next version of my application, I will send it to you guys. You guys should give me feedback for that one. But take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Take care, Sunny. Take care,
Hey,
Trippy.
Curly, when you cut this off, can you stay on? Oh, there you are.
Oh yeah.